Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2025 release Frewaka. It's a Shudder original and it's coming on Friday, April 25th. So this is a no spoiler review. Now I'm going to tell people up front, this is a subtitled film. So if you're a person who, for whatever reason, cannot handle subtitles, this is going to be one to skip. There is some English in this, but the overwhelming majority of this film is in Gaelic. This is an Irish film. And actually, interesting little fact, my name Carlin is a Gaelic name. My parents didn't choose it for that reason. It literally was from the side of a barn. Uh, Not a long story, but a story I'm not going to get into. But anyway, so Frewaka was written and directed by Aislinn Clarke, who also wrote The Devil's Doorway, which I have not seen. I know nothing about that film. Again, Irish film in Gaelic and a very small amount of English thrown in there. And actually, I kind of question why they even included some of the English, because it just feels out of place with how infrequent it is. So I think they should have just done the whole thing in Gaelic. Now, the interesting thing to note is, even when it's in English, there are still subtitles. So there are subtitles all the way through, whether they're talking in Gaelic or they're talking in English. So if you're a person who just likes subtitles in general, which I know a lot of people do, it's there. Again, Shudder original coming Friday, April 25th. So, quick synopsis. I don't want to give too much away in this film because there's a theme to it that just keeps getting hit kind of over and over and over again. So I don't want to end up giving that away because it's the crux of the entire film. But it's basically about a woman, focuses mainly on a woman who is kind of a care provider who needs to go to a remote location for this woman, obviously in Ireland, who's kind of a shut-in. And everyone's like, oh, she's an agoraphobic person. She's not the best person to be with, but she's basically supposed to be kind of like a home health aide for this individual, because that's her job. But she's coming off of having had a traumatic experience with her kind of estranged mother who passed. And I'm not going to tell you how that ended up happening. You do see that in the film. But it's just basically about her then showing up, the relationship she ends up trying to forge with this woman. And it's a horror film. Specifically, I will say it is a folk horror film, which makes a lot of sense in an Irish setting, especially with how the landscape in Ireland looks. Is very, very fitting for a folk horror film. But it's just about that relationship, and then horror things happen. And there's an okay amount of horror imagery. I kind of wish there was a lot more. I kind of wish they had done more horror things kind of sprinkled throughout the film, but they're in there. And when it happens, I think the horror imagery is done quite well. It's just I kind of wish there was more of that. But anyway, getting into some of my notes on this one. What you do see immediately in the film does scream folk horror. So me saying this is a folk horror film isn't really spoiling anything, because as soon as like the first few seconds of the film happen, you're immediately like, yes, this is going to be a folk horror film. It is very obvious from the images I'm seeing immediately. So just know that. Also, the opening sequence is disturbing. And it's not just what happens, and it's not even so much what happens, because I've seen stuff like that done before in film, but it is about how they shoot it and the score they use, which, by the way, I think the score is quite good in this film. That's one of my favorite aspects of the movie. How often and how loud they use it, not the biggest fan of that necessarily, but the composition of the score is very good. It fits perfectly for creating this kind of like off, unsettling, creepy atmosphere and maintaining it. And it's just very auditorily pleasing as well. It's very well put together score. So whoever did that, very nice job on that one. But also, like I was saying, the disturbing aspect of this opening sequence also has to do with how it's shot. And I will say that this film is shot pretty well, in my opinion. There are some interesting ideas as far as shot selection and kind of the images that end up getting put together from a cinematography standpoint. So I like that. It's visually pretty pleasing of a film. It is dark, though, throughout the film. There's not a whole lot of like bright colors or anything. It is pretty dark. But, you know, I think as horror fans, we're all kind of used to that by now, just making things kind of dark. But yeah, Pretty disturbing in the beginning. I will say, if you want something to kind of compare it to disturbing wise, that opening sequence, I would say something like The Dark and the Wicked. I think that was the name of the film that was on Shudder. Dark and the Wicked. That type of feel, in my opinion. So I do have to call this out. So every now and then there are problems with the screener copy that I'm given to review by Shudder, and this was one of those films. Now, sometimes the whatever that issue is ends up being a part of what they actually put on Shudder. So I'm hoping that's not the case with this one, because there was probably like a somewhere between 5 to 10 minute span of the film that it was all messed up. Like, think about back, if you ever watched anything on VHS, like when it would get like all scrambled and messed up and like kind of start looking like pixelated and everything. It was like that for like 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there. And yeah, I at first I was like, is my internet having problems? So I like skipped forward in it and it looked fine, and then I skipped backward and it looked fine, and then I hit that one little spot and it was a problem. So I'm just like, okay, it's actually an issue with the screener. So hopefully they have a different version that they're uploading to Shudder when it comes out on the 25th. So fingers crossed on that one for everyone. Again, this film is shot well. I did like the directing of it. The performances are quite good too. I think the characters are sold very well. A lot of the characters, the ones that aren't the main characters, are quite awkward, and I do like kind of how awkward they are. They feed pretty well into the overall feel of the film, of things being kind of unsettling and off and odd, and it just puts you in that mode of like, what are people hiding? You know, what's really going on with this place that she's in right now? Like, what's the underlying thing? It just creates this air of mystery in addition to being unsettling and creepy at the same time. So performances were good from that standpoint. I think the two leads in particular, as should be the case in a film like this, did quite a nice job. So they did what they could with the script, which the script is fine. Any having issues with the script, I think the dialogue is well written, honestly. Although the actual subtitling was a little bit off at times, like there would be words added that weren't actually said. I could tell from the English parts, but so I'm assuming there were potentially a few issues with the Gaelic subtitles as well. But obviously, I don't know that language. But the pacing is pretty slow, and like I said before, it could use some more horror moments kind of sprinkled in. It feels its slowest and most poorly paced at the moments where it feels like they're just kind of nailing the same thing over and over and over again. The two main characters are having interactions that start to feel very repetitive and similar. And you're just like, okay, you know, we've done this before. This has already been established. We don't need to kind of languish in this. Throw us some more horror stuff or just progress the story, please. So pacing, not great, unfortunately, and that's one of the things that killed my experience with this film. The ending is okay, but again, going back to the pacing issue, the ending's too drawn out for me personally. I think it would have been much better if it was a little bit more succinct. Some of the imagery, some of the shots I thought were very effective for the ending of the film in particular. I like what they chose to do at the end of the film. But it also felt very similar to other films I've seen before. And that leads me to my last bullet point, which is I have seen movies a lot like this frequently within the last 5-6 years, to be honest. So it doesn't really feel like this film stands out a whole lot. Now, that said, I don't know what the Irish output necessarily has been for horror films like this. So maybe within that little film community, it's relatively unique. But from the perspective of what I've seen, and I've seen, you know, a lot of films from around the world, well, not in comparison to how many are made, not a lot, but an okay amount, it doesn't feel very special. You know, it feels like well-trodden territory that's been trodden very recently, that's just not super unique. You know, I've seen this done before, and I've seen it done better. But it's not to say that this is bad. So anyway, let me go ahead and just give my rating on this film. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I'm very in the middle on it. There were some things I really liked. There's some things I really didn't like, such as the pacing being really bad and the overall script just feeling kind of, okay, seen it before, got it. You just wanted to do your version, which isn't very unique, but, you know, anyway. Thought about going 3 stars, but the pacing issue made me knock it down to 2.5. But anyway, would love to hear other people's opinions, especially if you have a differing opinion, because I'm always open to hearing that. Maybe there's something I missed with this film that I should consider. Put it in the comments. When we can talk spoilers in the comments, that's totally fine. Do me a quick favor and support me by hitting subscribe if you haven't already. That's the free way to do it. If you want to go a little bit further and you do want to, you know, support me monetarily a little bit, I do appreciate that. I have memberships linked in the description. There are 3 tier levels, including the top tier called Possession, that ends up getting extra videos that no one else will get. Those videos are behind a paywall. They're like vlog style, but one of the things I have been doing with it is going through my, I just started this, but I'm going through my physical media collection to just kind of pull out kind of what I consider hidden gems that I have in my collection and talking about them and kind of trying to sell them to people to be like, hey, this is why you should seek this movie out and watch it. So just stuff like that. Some good recommendations. But anyway, you can check out those. Thumbs up is another fun free way to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. You can hit the notification bell button. And yeah, I think that's it. But I really do appreciate everyone's time. And until next time, keep it brutal.